Jonah Cunningham stared at the water-stained ceiling of the Riverside Community Shelter, listening to his 8-year-old son Marcus breathe softly in the bunk above him. The boy had finally stopped crying himself to sleep 2 weeks ago. Small victories. That's what Jonah told himself every morning when he woke up on this thin mattress that smelled of industrial detergent and broken dreams. 6 months. That's how long they'd been here since the divorce finalized. 6 months since Darla had walked out with her lawyer, some shark her father Randall Edwards had hired, and systematically dismantled everything Jonah had built over 12 years of marriage. The house went to her. The savings account cleaned out. His car sold to pay marital debts he'd never heard of until the judge's gavel fell. Even the woodworking tools his own father had left him vanished into some storage unit Darla's family controlled. "You're on your own now, boy," Randall had said to him on the courthouse steps, his thin lips curled in something between a smile and a sneer. The man wore his wealth like armor, tailored suit, gold watch, that particular brand of arrogance that came from never having been told no. "Should have treated my daughter better. Should have made something of yourself." Jonah had made something of himself. He'd been a commercial electrician, good at his trade, reliable. They'd lived comfortably, not extravagantly. He'd thought that was enough. Apparently, for Darla and her family, it never had been. "Dad," Marcus's voice drifted down, small and uncertain. "Is it morning yet?" "Not quite, buddy. Another hour. Try to sleep." "I can't. My stomach hurts." Jonah climbed down and sat on his son's bunk, rubbing his back. The shelter breakfast wouldn't be served until 6, and it was barely 5. Marcus had been having stomach problems since they arrived. Stress, the shelter doctor said. What 8-year-old should have to deal with stress like this? "Tell you what," Jonah whispered. "How about we play the game? You remember? Tell me 3 good things." Marcus was quiet for a moment, then said, "I got an A on my spelling test yesterday. Mrs. Patterson said my handwriting is getting better. And you're here with me." Jonah's throat tightened. "That's my guy. 3 good things every day, no matter what." They did everything 6 months ago. Now his son was counting as a blessing that his father hadn't abandoned him too. The rage that lived in Jonah's chest flared hot, but he pushed it down like he always did. Marcus didn't need to see that. Marcus needed to see his father staying strong, staying present, staying sane. The rest of the morning passed in the shelter's familiar rhythm. Breakfast in the cafeteria, powdered eggs and toast. Marcus caught the bus to school, his backpack patched with duct tape. Jonah headed to the day labor office on Morrison Street, where he'd pick up whatever cash under the table work he could find. Today, it was moving furniture for a rental company. His back would ache by evening, but the $50 meant he could buy Marcus a decent meal somewhere other than the shelter. He was walking back that afternoon, sweaty and exhausted, when a woman in a gray suit intercepted him outside the shelter. Jonah Cunningham? He tensed. Process servers had found him here twice already. More bills from the divorce. More claims from Darla's lawyers. "Who's asking?" "Meredith Liu. I'm a real estate attorney." She handed him a business card, her expression serious but not unkind. "I need to speak with you urgently. It's about a property on 5th Street. "Lady, I don't own any property. If you're here to serve me papers." "I'm not." "Mr. Cunningham, do you have 10 minutes? There's a coffee shop around the corner. I'll buy." Something in her tone made him follow. Maybe it was the fact that she called him Mr. Cunningham instead of treating him like a deadbeat. Or maybe he was just too tired to care anymore. The coffee shop was quiet, mid-afternoon lull. Meredith bought him a coffee and a sandwich without asking, then spread paperwork across the small table. "Mr. Cunningham, 3 weeks ago, I was contacted by one of my clients, a property management company. They were having issues with a building owner who seemed to be absent. After some investigation, I tracked the chain of ownership to you, specifically to a building at 447 5th Street, 12 units. Do you know anything about this?" Jonas stared at her. "No, I don't own any buildings. I'm an electrician. That's what I thought you might say." She slid a document toward him. It was a deed recorded 8 years ago. His name was on it, along with a signature that looked like his, but his breath caught. "This is from my uncle. Uncle Gerald. He died 8 years ago. Gerald Cunningham, yes. He left the building to you in his will." It was handled by. She checked her notes, a lawyer named Stevie Kramer, who apparently was also the executor. The deed was recorded, but the documentation was minimal. Did you ever receive notification? No. Jonah's mind raced. 8 years ago, he'd been at Uncle Gerald's funeral. Darla had been with him, 7 months pregnant with Marcus. Randall and Carolyn Edwards had been there too, hovering, inserting themselves into everything like they always did. Darla handled the estate paperwork. Her father said he'd take care of it. Uncle Gerald didn't have much, just some old furniture, I thought. Meredith's expression darkened. Mr. Cunningham, your uncle owned a 12-unit apartment building in a prime location. Current market value is approximately $2.8 million. It's been rented continuously for the past 8 years. The monthly rent income is approximately $18,000. The numbers didn't make sense. Jonah felt like he was underwater, sounds muffled and distorted. That's what? The income has been going to an LLC called Edwards Holdings for the past 8 years. The registered agent is Randall Edwards, your father-in-law. The rage exploded back into Jonah's chest, white-hot and blinding. His hands clenched around the coffee cup hard enough to hurt. They stole it. They stole my inheritance, and they've been taking the money this whole time. It appears that way. The management company reached out to me because Edwards Holdings has been difficult to work with, refusing necessary repairs, trying to raise rents beyond legal limits. They wanted to verify the ownership chain. When I discovered the property was actually yours and that you were, she gestured vaguely, not benefiting from it, I knew something was wrong. Jonah looked at the deed, at his signature that wasn't quite his signature, at the date that lined up with Uncle Gerald's death. He thought about the past 8 years. The arguments with Darla about money. Her insistence that they were barely scraping by, even when he was working steady, bringing home good money. Her father's constant criticism, the implication that Jonah wasn't providing for his family properly. The divorce, where suddenly everything was in Darla's name, had been in her name, was documented as hers. They've been stealing from him for 8 years. They planned this. All of it. Mr. Cunningham? Meredith's voice was gentle. Are you all right? He wasn't. But he looked at her and said, what can I do? Can I get it back? That's why I'm here. Yes, you can. But it's going to be complicated. They've been operating as if they had legal authority for years. We'll need to. How much will it cost? For a lawyer? Meredith studied him for a moment. Let me ask you something. If you could prove fraud, prove they forged documents and stole from you, would you want to pursue criminal charges? Yes. She smiled, sharp and satisfied. Then let's do this right. I'll work on contingency. You pay me nothing up front. When we recover your property and your lost income, we'll settle on fees. But Mr. Cunningham, I need you to understand something. This isn't just about getting your building back. If we prove fraud, if we show they orchestrated this theft and used it to manipulate your divorce, we could potentially reverse portions of your divorce settlement. We could make them pay back every cent they stole, plus damages. Jonah's mind was spinning. Why are you doing this? Why help me? Because I hate bullies. Because fraud like this makes a mockery of the legal system. And because I looked you up, Mr. Cunningham, before your divorce. You had perfect credit, steady employment, and no record of any kind. Then suddenly you're in a shelter. That didn't sit right with me. She gathered her papers. Go back to the shelter. Don't contact your ex-wife or her family. Don't tell anyone about this yet. I'm going to file paperwork tomorrow morning, a claim on the property, a demand for accounting, and a fraud complaint with the district attorney's office. This is going to get ugly. Are you ready for that? Jonah thought about Marcus, sleeping above him in a homeless shelter. Thought about Randall Edwards' smirk on the courthouse steps. Thought about 8 years of stolen income. Over $1 million that could have changed everything for his family. I'm ready. The next 3 days were a strange kind of torture. Jonah went through his routine, day labor, picking up Marcus from school, dinner at the shelter, but his mind was elsewhere, running through everything he remembered about Uncle Gerald's death and what came after. Uncle Gerald had been his father's younger brother, a bachelor who'd worked as a property manager his whole life and quietly bought buildings with his savings. Jonah had visited him monthly, brought Marcus to see him. When Gerald died of a sudden heart attack, Darla had insisted on helping with the estate arrangements. Her father, Randall, had recommended a lawyer, Stevie Kramer. Everything had happened so fast. Jonah tried to recall if he'd signed anything. He must have, right? But it was all a blur of grief and newborn exhaustion and Darla's family taking charge of everything. On the fourth day, Meredith called him. "Can you meet me at my office in an hour?" He got there in 45 minutes. Her office was downtown, modest but professional. She had more documents spread across her desk, and her expression was grim. "I've been digging. It's worse than I thought, but also better for our case." She turned her laptop toward him. "This is Stevie Kramer, the lawyer who handled your uncle's estate. He was disbarred 6 years ago for fraud and embezzlement. He currently works as a consultant for various Edwards family businesses. He works for them, not officially, but I pulled records. In the past 10 years, Stevie Kramer has been involved in at least 6 estate cases where heirs mysteriously lost property that ended up in Edwards Holdings. Your case isn't unique, it's a pattern." Jonah felt sick. How many people have they done this to? At least 5 that I can confirm. Probably more. The Edwards family, specifically Randall and his son Donnie, have built a small real estate empire by stealing inherited properties. They target people who are vulnerable, grieving, distracted, trusting. They insert themselves, offer to help, and then forge documents to redirect ownership. "Can we prove it?" Meredith smiled, and it was almost frightening. "Yes, I've already spoken with 3 other victims. They're willing to testify, and I found something else." She pulled up another document. "Your divorce proceedings. Do you remember signing a financial affidavit that stated you had no assets?" "Yeah," Darla's lawyer said. It was standard. "Did you read it carefully?" Jonah stopped. He'd been so overwhelmed, so beaten down by that point. "Probably not. I thought so." Because attached to that affidavit was an addendum that specifically listed the 5th Street property as marital debt that you were transferring to Darla as part of the settlement. Essentially, you gave her your building to settle debts that didn't exist. But I never knew about the building. Exactly. Which means the divorce settlement was fraudulent. You can't transfer property you don't know you own. And here's the beautiful part. The lawyer who represented Darla in the divorce was hired by Randall Edwards. The same Randall Edwards who was stealing from you through Edwards Holdings. They knew about the building. They hid it from you. They used it to manipulate the divorce. That's conspiracy to commit fraud, possibly racketeering. Jonah's hands were shaking. What happens now? Now I've filed everything with the court. By tomorrow morning, Edwards Holdings will be served with a cease and desist on the 5th Street property. All rental income will be frozen. Randall, Carolyn, and Donnie Edwards will be served with fraud complaints. And I've sent everything to the district attorney's office. She paused. "Mr. Cunningham, this is going to explode. The Edwards family has money and connections. They're going to fight back hard. You need to be prepared. What can they do to me? I'm already in a homeless shelter. They already took everything. They might try to intimidate you. They might try to offer you a settlement, a fraction of what you're owed, to make this go away. You need to be strong. Can you do that?" Jonah thought about Marcus, about every night in the shelter, about Randall Edwards telling him he was on his own. "I can do that." "Good. Because in 1 week, we're going to request an emergency hearing to place the 5th Street property back under your control. And then we're going to take everything from them, just like they took everything from you." The explosion came faster than expected. 2 days after the legal documents were served, Jonah's phone, a cheap prepaid thing he'd bought with day labor money, rang with an unknown number. "Jonah, it's Darla." Her voice was tight, scared. "What the hell are you doing?" He stepped outside the shelter, into the cold evening air. "I'm taking back what's mine. That building was part of the settlement. You agreed. I agreed to nothing. You lied to me. Your family stole from me. That's not. My father said it was all legal. He said, 'Your father is a thief, Darla. He's been stealing from me for 8 years. Did you know? Did you know the whole time?' Silence. Then, quietly, he told me the building was worthless, that it was just a tax burden. He said he was protecting us. By stealing $1 million of rental income, by forging my signature, by using it to cheat me in our divorce. Jonah, please. If this goes forward, my family will be destroyed. My father could go to jail. Can't we? Can't we work something out? And there it was. The manipulation, the attempt to play on his sympathy. A year ago, it might have worked. But Jonah remembered Marcus crying himself to sleep. Remembered feeding his son from a shelter cafeteria. Remembered Randall Edwards' smirk. You should have thought about that before you left me with nothing. Tell your father I'll see him in court. He hung up. That night, as Marcus slept above him, Jonah allowed himself to think about the future. If he won, when he won, he'd have his building back. He'd have income, real income. He could get Marcus out of here into a real home. Maybe even sue for custody modification, show that Darla and her family were criminals. But something else was growing in him, something darker than just wanting his property back. Meredith had said there were other victims, other families the Edwards clan had robbed. If they'd done this to him, destroyed his life so casually, they deserved more than just losing their stolen properties. They deserved to understand what it felt like to lose everything. Jonah pulled out a notebook, one of the supplies the shelter provided, and started writing. Not just the facts of his case, but everything he knew about Randall Edwards. The man loved to talk, to brag. Over the years, at family dinners before the divorce, Randall had told stories. Business deals, properties, the people he'd outmaneuvered. Jonah had tuned it out at the time, but now he dredged up every memory. Randall had a pattern. He'd find someone vulnerable, a widow, an orphan, someone grieving, and insert himself as a helpful friend. Then properties would mysteriously transfer to Edwards Holdings. Always with paperwork that looked legitimate. Always with someone like Stevie Kramer facilitating. By dawn, Jonah had filled 6 pages. It wasn't evidence, not yet, but it was a roadmap, a way to unravel everything the Edwards family had built on fraud and theft. When Meredith called that morning, he was ready. The hearing is set for next Wednesday, she said. We'll need to... I want to expand the case, Jonah interrupted. You said there were other victims. I want to find all of them. I want to burn the Edwards family to the ground. There was a pause. Then Meredith laughed, sharp and approving. Now you're thinking like a winner. Let's talk strategy. The Riverside Community Shelter had a small library, 2 bookshelves and 3 computers for residents to use. Over the next week, Jonah spent every free moment there, working with Meredith remotely as they built their case. She found 5 confirmed victims of the Edwards family scheme, spanning 10 years. Each one followed the same pattern. Someone inherited property. Randall Edwards or his son Donnie appeared offering help, and somehow the property ended up in Edwards Holdings. The victims had either been paid tiny settlement amounts or, like Jonah, had no idea they'd owned anything at all. We need them to testify, Meredith said during one of their calls. The more people who come forward, the stronger the case. It stops being a he said, she said about your specific property and becomes proof of a criminal enterprise. Have you reached out to them? I've contacted 4. 3 are willing to talk. One is complicated. Complicated how? His name is Freeman Parks. The Edwards family took his father's commercial property in 2019. Freeman tried to sue them, but they buried him in legal fees until he had to drop it. He's bitter, angry, and he doesn't trust lawyers anymore. But his testimony would be powerful. He has documentation showing Randall Edwards promised to manage the property temporarily, then forge papers to transfer ownership. Can I talk to him? You want to talk to him yourself? I'm not a lawyer. Maybe he'll trust me more. Meredith gave him Freeman's number. The call didn't start well. Who the hell is this? Freeman's voice was rough, suspicious. My name's Jonah Cunningham. The Edwards family stole property from me too. My lawyer said you might be able to help. Help? Help with what? Another lawsuit that goes nowhere? Another lawyer who promises justice and then bills me into bankruptcy. I'm not asking you to pay anything. I'm living in a homeless shelter with my son because Randall Edwards stole my inheritance and used it to destroy me in my divorce. I'm not looking for a payout. I'm looking to make them pay for what they did. Silence. Then, you're in a shelter? For 6 months now. My 8-year-old son sleeps in a bunk above me. We eat powdered eggs for breakfast. And Randall Edwards has been collecting rent on property my uncle left me. Property worth almost $3 million. Freeman's breathing was heavy on the line. They got my dad's building. My dad worked 40 years to buy that property. When he died, Randall came to the funeral, put his arm around me, told me he'd handle everything so I could grieve. I was 23, stupid, trusting. By the time I figured out what happened, the building was in Edward Holdings and I had no legal recourse. I spent $50,000 on lawyers who told me I'd signed all the right papers. Papers I never remember signing. That's what they do. They prey on people when they're vulnerable. But Freeman, we have something they didn't have when you sued. We have proof. We have documentation that Stevie Kramer, the lawyer who probably handled your dad's estate, was disbarred for fraud. We have multiple victims. We have them cornered. What do you need from me? I need you to testify. Tell a judge what happened. Bring whatever documentation you still have. Help me prove this wasn't just my case. It's how they operate. Another long pause. Then, when's the hearing? Wednesday, 10 a.m., downtown courthouse. I'll be there. And Cunningham? Make them bleed. The night before the hearing, Jonah couldn't sleep. Marcus was restless too, tossing in the bunk above. Finally, around midnight, Jonah climbed up and lay next to his son. Dad, Marcus whispered. Are you scared? Yeah, buddy. I am. What happens tomorrow? Jonah considered lying, saying everything will be fine. But Marcus deserved better. Tomorrow I'm going to court. I'm going to try to get back something that bad people stole from us. If I win, it means we can leave this place, get our own apartment, have a real home again. And if you don't win, then we keep trying. We don't give up, Marcus. We never give up. Marcus was quiet, then said, I heard some of the other kids talking. They said we're poor because you're lazy. Is that true? Jonah's heart clenched. No, that's not true. We're here because people lied and cheated. But I'm going to fix it. I promise. I believe you, Dad. Those 4 words, simple, trusting, lit a fire in Jonah that burned brighter than his rage. He wasn't just fighting for himself. He was fighting to prove to his son that justice existed, that the world wasn't just cruel and random, that standing up to bullies mattered. The next morning, Jonah put on the only dress shirt he owned, wrinkled for being stuffed in a shelter locker, and took a bus downtown. Meredith met him outside the courthouse, immaculate in a Navy suit. Ready. More than ready. The courtroom was smaller than he expected. Randall Edwards sat at the defendant's table with 2 lawyers, his face red with anger. Carolyn Edwards was beside him, looking scared. Donnie Edwards, Darla's brother, sat behind them, arms crossed, glaring at Jonah with pure hatred. Darla was there too, in the gallery. She wouldn't meet his eyes. Judge Lydia Fleming was a stern woman in her 60s who looked at the assembled parties with barely concealed irritation. This is an emergency hearing regarding property at 447 5th Street. Ms. Liu, you've made some serious allegations. I've reviewed your filing. You have 30 minutes to convince me this warrants an emergency injunction. Meredith stood. Your Honor, this case involves systematic fraud spanning a decade. Mr. Cunningham inherited the 5th Street property from his uncle 8 years ago. He was never notified. Instead, the defendants, she gestured to Randall Edwards, used a disbarred lawyer to forge documents and redirect ownership to their LLC, Edwards Holdings. For 8 years, they collected approximately $18,000 monthly in rental income. Over $1.7 million stolen from Mr. Cunningham. One of Randall's lawyers stood. Objection, Your Honor. Stolen implies criminality. This is a civil dispute over property interpretation. It's not interpretation when signatures are forged. Meredith cut in. She presented documents. This is the deed recorded when Mr. Cunningham's uncle died. The signature appears to be Mr. Cunningham's, but we've had it analyzed by a handwriting expert. She handed over a report. It's a forgery. The real signature is noticeably different, particularly in the formation of the letter C and the terminal stroke of the N. Judge Fleming studied the documents. Mr. Edwards, do you have a response? Randall's lawyer answered. The property was part of a complex estate arrangement. Our client was asked to manage it temporarily. Then why, Meredith interrupted, was the rental income deposited into Edwards Holdings accounts and never disclosed to Mr. Cunningham? Why was the property listed in his divorce settlement as a debt he was transferring to his ex-wife when he had no knowledge it existed? The judge's expression darkened. That's a good question. Mr. Edwards. Randall stood, his face purple. Your Honor, this is a vindictive ex-son-in-law trying to answer the question. Why wasn't Mr. Cunningham informed he owned this property? It was an oversight. The lawyer handling the estate, Stevie Kramer, who was disbarred for fraud and now works for you. Meredith's voice was sharp. Your Honor, this isn't an oversight. It's a pattern. I have 3 other victims of identical schemes here today to testify. That was when Freeman Parks stood up in the gallery, along with 2 other people Jonah had never met. The judge looked at them, then back at Randall Edwards. This hearing is about the 5th Street property, the judge said slowly. But I'm troubled by these allegations. Ms. Liu, I'm granting your emergency injunction. All rental income from 447 5th Street will be placed in escrow pending a full trial. Mr. Cunningham is recognized as the legal owner, and Edwards Holdings is barred from any further management of the property. She looked at Randall. Mr. Edwards, I'm also ordering you to provide a full accounting of all income and expenses related to this property for the past 8 years. You have 30 days. If I find evidence of fraud, I will not hesitate to refer this to the district attorney. Randall's face went from purple to white. His lawyer tried to object, but the judge cut him off. We're adjourned. Mr. Cunningham, see the clerk about taking immediate possession of your property. Jonah sat in stunned silence as the judge left. He'd won. The building was his. The income would be frozen, investigated. It was more than he'd hoped for. But as he looked at Randall Edwards, the man sputtering with rage, being restrained by his lawyers, Jonah realized this was just the beginning. Taking possession of the building was surreal. Meredith arranged for a locksmith to meet them at 447 5th Street that afternoon. The building was a 4-story brick structure, well-maintained on the outside, each floor containing 3 apartments. The property manager, a tired-looking woman named Maura Terry, met them at the entrance. Mr. Cunningham, I'm so glad to finally meet you. I've been trying to get Edwards Holdings to approve repairs for 2 years. The boiler is barely functional, and several units have water damage. What happened to the rental income? Jonah asked. Maura looked uncomfortable. I sent it to Edwards Holdings every month, minus my management fee. But Mr. Edwards, Randall, he always claimed there was barely any profit after expenses. I questioned it a few times, but he told me to mind my business. Jonah walked through the building with Meredith and Maura. The apartments were occupied, mostly by working-class families. The conditions ranged from acceptable to concerning. The water damage Maura mentioned was significant in one unit, and the heating was indeed inadequate. How much does each unit rent for? Jonah asked. $1,500 a month average. So $18,000 monthly total, like your lawyer said. $18,000 a month. For 8 years. Even after expenses, management fees, and repairs, it should have been over $1 million in profit. Money that could have changed everything for him and Marcus. That evening, back at the shelter, Jonah did the math in his notebook. With the building under his control, he could start collecting rent immediately. But first, he needed to make repairs, hire a proper management company, maybe even upgrade the units to justify higher rent in the future. Marcus climbed down from his bunk and sat beside him. Did you win, Dad? Yeah, buddy. I won. Does that mean we can leave? Soon. The building needs some work first. But soon. He pulled Marcus close. I promise. The next morning, Meredith called with news. The DA's office is moving forward. They've opened a criminal investigation into the Edwards family. They want to interview you, Freeman Parks, and the other victims. Jonah, this is bigger than just getting your property back. If they find enough evidence, Randall Edwards and his son could face serious prison time. What about Darla? That's complicated. She could claim she didn't know about the fraud. It depends on what evidence they find. Do you want her prosecuted? Jonah thought about it. Part of him wanted to see her suffer like he'd suffered. But another part, a smaller part, remembered the woman he'd married. The woman before her family poisoned everything. Only if she knew. If she was part of the scheme. Fair enough. Listen, there's something else. Randall Edwards called my office this morning. He wants to meet. Discuss a settlement. No. Jonah, hear me out. He's scared. The criminal investigation has him panicked. He might offer you significant money to drop the civil case, which wouldn't affect the criminal case, but would make your life easier. I don't want his money. I want justice. Meredith was quiet for a moment. Then let's make sure you get it. The DA wants to move fast. The trial will probably be scheduled within 3 months. Can you hold on until then? I've held on this long. The weeks that followed were a strange combination of triumph and tedium. Jonah used the frozen rental income, which the court released to him in increments for repairs, to fix the building's most pressing problems. He hired contractors, oversaw work, learned about property management on the fly. For the first time in 6 months, he felt useful, purposeful. He also met with the district attorney, a sharp-eyed prosecutor named Casey West. She was building a case not just against Randall Edwards, but against Stevie Kramer and Donnie Edwards as well. It turned out Donnie had been actively involved in several of the property thefts, particularly in scouting targets and befriending vulnerable heirs. Your case is the keystone, Casey told Jonah. It's the most recent, the most documented, and it directly connects to your divorce, which shows premeditation and conspiracy. If we can prove they planned your divorce around the stolen property, we've got them. Freeman Parks became an unlikely ally. The two men met for coffee regularly, sharing their experiences, comparing notes. Freeman had lost his father's building, a commercial property in the warehouse district, and had spiraled into debt trying to fight the Edwards family legally. I was angrier than you, Freeman admitted during one of their meetings. I wanted to burn Randall's house down. Literally. I sat outside his place with a gas gun one night, trying to work up the nerve. Then I realized that's what he'd want. He'd love to see me become a criminal, throw my life away over him. So I didn't do it. What changed your mind? Jonah asked. I thought about my dad. What he'd want. He wouldn't want me in prison. He'd want me to win the right way, or at least try. Freeman stirred his coffee. When your lawyer called, I thought it was just another dead end. But then I met you. Saw your kid. Realized you're actually going to beat them. And I wanted to be part of that. We're going to beat them, Jonah corrected. Together. The friendship, built on shared trauma and shared purpose, became one of the few bright spots in Jonah's life. Freeman helped him with the building repairs, offering his construction skills. In return, Jonah promised that when the Edwards family's assets were seized, when, not if, he'd help Freeman go after his father's building too. But as the trial date approached, threats started coming. Anonymous calls to Jonah's phone, warning him to drop the case. Someone slashed the tires on the contractor's truck at the 5th Street building. And one night, a brick came through the window of one of the apartments, wrapped with a note. This is just the beginning. Jonah reported it all to the DA, who promised protection. But he knew the Edwards family was getting desperate, which meant they were also getting dangerous. Marcus's 9th birthday fell 2 weeks before the trial. Jonah used some of the rental income, finally, to rent a small apartment for the weekend, just for the party. He invited the few friends Marcus had made at school, Freeman Parks, Meredith Liu, and even some of the families from the shelter. It was the first time in 6 months that Marcus had looked truly happy. They played games, ate pizza, and for a few hours, Jonah allowed himself to forget about the trial, the threats, the Edwards family. That night, after everyone left and Marcus was asleep on the apartment's couch, Jonah stood at the window looking out at the city. In 2 weeks, everything would come to a head. The criminal trial would determine if Randall, Donnie, and Stevie Kramer went to prison. The civil trial, scheduled shortly after, would determine if Jonah could recover his stolen income and potentially reverse the divorce settlement. But more than that, it would determine if justice actually existed. If people like the Edwards family could be held accountable. If a man living in a homeless shelter could take on wealth and power and win. His phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. You're making a mistake. Think about your son. Jonah stared at the message for a long moment. Then he forwarded it to Casey West and deleted it from his phone. They wanted him scared. Wanted him to fold, to take whatever settlement they offered, to disappear quietly. But Jonah Cunningham had already lost everything once. He'd lived in a shelter, watched his son cry, felt the weight of complete powerlessness. And he'd survived. He'd clawed his way back. They couldn't scare him anymore. They could only make him more determined. The criminal trial of Randall Edwards, Donnie Edwards, and Stevie Kramer began on a cold Tuesday morning. The courthouse was packed. Local media had picked up the story, framing it as a David versus Goliath tale of systematic fraud and real estate corruption. Jonah sat in the front row of the gallery. Marcus beside him. School was out for teacher conferences, and Jonah wanted his son to see justice happen. Across the aisle, Carolyn Edwards sat alone, looking small and frightened. Darla wasn't there. The prosecution's case was methodical and devastating. Casey West walked the jury through 10 years of the Edwards family schemes, starting with Freeman Park's father's building and ending with Jonah's case. She presented forensic handwriting analysis showing forged signatures. She presented financial records showing millions in stolen income. She presented testimony from 5 victims, each telling similar stories of vulnerability exploited, trust betrayed, property stolen. Freeman Parks was a powerful witness. He described his father's death, Randall Edwards appearing at the funeral with condolences and offers to help, and then discovering months later that his father's building was gone. "I trusted him," Freeman said, his voice breaking slightly. "He seemed kind, caring, like he genuinely wanted to help me through the worst time of my life. And he used that trust to rob me." When it was Jonah's turn to testify, he told his story simply and honestly. His uncle's death, Darla and her family taking charge of the estate, the 8 years of not knowing he owned property, the divorce that took everything, the homeless shelter. "Mr. Cunningham," Casey West asked, "did you ever suspect your in-laws were stealing from you?" "No, I thought." Jonah paused, choosing his words carefully. "I thought they just didn't like me. Thought I wasn't good enough for their daughter. I worked hard, tried to provide, but it was never enough. I didn't realize they were comparing me to money they'd stolen from me." The defense tried to paint Jonah as bitter and vindictive, a failed husband looking for someone to blame. But it fell apart when they couldn't explain the forged signatures, the hidden income, the pattern of theft affecting multiple families. Stevie Kramer broke first. On the 3rd day of trial, his lawyer announced he was accepting a plea deal, testifying against Randall and Donnie Edwards in exchange for a reduced sentence. His testimony was damning. He described the system. Randall would identify targets, grieving heirs. Usually, Donnie would befriend them, and Stevie would handle the legal paperwork, forging signatures and creating false documentation. "How many times did you do this?" Casey West asked. "8 that I can't confirm. Probably more that I'm not remembering." "And Mr. Edwards knew these signatures were forged?" "He provided me with documents to copy the signatures from. Driver's licenses, old tax forms. He wanted them to look legitimate." Randall Edwards' face went red. His lawyer objected frantically, but the damage was done. The trial lasted 2 weeks. The jury deliberated for 6 hours. Guilty on all counts: fraud, forgery, conspiracy, theft. Randall Edwards would serve 15 years. Donnie Edwards would serve 8. Stevie Kramer, with his plea deal, would serve 3. Jonas sat in the courtroom, Marcus's hand in his, and watched the Edwards men be led away in handcuffs. Carolyn Edwards was crying. Some part of Jonah felt sorry for her. She'd been collateral damage, married to a criminal, probably unaware of the full extent of his crimes. But mostly he felt free. The civil trial came 3 weeks later. With the criminal convictions secured, the civil case was almost anticlimactic. The judge ruled quickly. Jonah was owed 8 years of rental income, minus legitimate expenses, plus damages. The total came to just over $2 million. Edwards Holdings' assets, including several other buildings they'd accumulated through similar schemes, would be liquidated to pay the judgment. More importantly, the divorce settlement was vacated. The judge ruled that since it had been built on fraud, specifically the hidden property and manufactured debts, it was void. A new custody hearing would be scheduled, and all marital assets would be reevaluated. Darla attended this trial. She approached Jonah afterward, tears streaming down her face. "I didn't know. I swear, Jonah, I didn't know what they were doing." "Did you know I owned the building?" She hesitated. Not at first. My father told me about it after we filed for divorce. He said it was complicated, that you'd mismanaged it, that we were helping clean up your mess. I believed him. I believed everything he told me about you. Jonah looked at the woman he'd once loved. She looked tired, older than her years. You took my son to a homeless shelter, Darla. Even if you didn't know about the building, you knew what you were doing during the divorce. You knew your lawyer was destroying me. I thought, my father said you'd be fine, that you were exaggerating the hardship to gain sympathy. I didn't know you were actually. She stopped, wiping her eyes. I'm sorry, for what that's worth. It was worth something. Not forgiveness, maybe, but closure. I don't want to keep Marcus from you, Jonah said finally. But I want full custody. If you want visitation, we can work that out. But he stays with me. She nodded, defeated. Okay. Marcus, who'd been standing nearby with Freeman, ran over. Dad, Mr. Freeman says we can get ice cream. Can we? Jonah looked at his son, smiling, excited, free from the shadow of a shelter, and nodded. Yeah, buddy, we can get ice cream. 6 months after the criminal trial, Jonah closed on the purchase of Freeman Park's father's building. With the money from the civil judgment, he'd bought it back from the company that had foreclosed on Edwards Holdings. He transferred the deed to Freeman, free and clear. This was your dad's, Jonas said, handing over the paperwork. It should stay in your family. Freeman stared at the deed, tears in his eyes. I can't. This is worth $500,000. I can't accept this. You can, and you will. We're partners now, remember? You help me with my building, I help you with yours. They'd formed a property management company, Cunningham and Parks Holdings, and were slowly buying buildings in the neighborhood, renovating them, providing affordable housing. It wasn't charity, it was good business. But it was also a way to make sure no one else got exploited the way they had been. Marcus thrived. They'd moved into one of the renovated apartments at the 5th Street building, a 3-bedroom unit on the top floor with windows that let in morning light. Marcus had his own room, decorated with posters and books. He'd made new friends, his grades had improved, and the stomach problems had disappeared. Darla saw him every other weekend. The visits were cordial, supervised at first, then gradually more relaxed as Jonah watched her try to rebuild a relationship with their son. She'd started therapy, gotten a job separate from her family's businesses, and seemed genuinely committed to being better. Randall Edwards was in prison. Donnie Edwards was in prison. Stevie Kramer was in prison. The DA's office was still investigating their other schemes, finding more victims, building more cases. One evening, Jonah stood on the roof of his building, looking out at the city. Freeman joined him, handing him a beer. You ever think about what would have happened if that lawyer hadn't found you? Freeman asked. Every day. If Meredith hadn't cared enough to track me down, I'd still be in the shelter. Maybe forever. You'd have figured something out. You're too stubborn to stay down. Jonah laughed. Maybe. But I'm glad I didn't have to find out. He took a sip of beer. You know what the crazy thing is? Randall Edwards always said I'd never amount to anything. That I was just a blue-collar nobody who couldn't provide for his family. And in his mind, he was probably right. I was never going to be rich, never going to be powerful. I was just going to be a guy who worked hard and tried to be a good father. And that wasn't enough for him. No, but it's enough for me. It's enough for Marcus. And now, because of what Randall did, I actually have something. Not just money or property, but proof that doing the right thing matters. That justice exists. That you can lose everything and still come back. Freeman clinked his beer against Jonas. To coming back. To coming back, Jonah echoed. Below them, the city lights twinkled in the evening darkness. Somewhere out there, other people were struggling, other families were being torn apart by greed and cruelty. But here, on this roof, in this building that had been stolen and then reclaimed, Jonah Cunningham felt something he hadn't felt in a long time. He felt like he'd won. Not just the legal battles, or the money, or the custody. He'd won something more important. His dignity, his purpose, his belief that the world could be made right. And watching Marcus sleep peacefully in his own bedroom that night, Jonah knew that was the only victory that truly mattered. And there you have it. Another story comes to an end. What did you think? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoy this story, consider joining our community by subscribing. It means the world to us. For more stories like this one, check out the recommended videos on screen. And I'll see you there.